Today on the show, strategy plus action equals making the jump from corporate to entrepreneurship. Great coaches and consultants like you have the ability to change people's lives and transform entire organizations. And your impact can often go far beyond the clients you work with. One of the reasons I love working with coaches and consultants is because of that ripple effect. This show is here to highlight your expertise and empower you with resources and new ideas to grow your business. Welcome to Strategy in Action. Reagan Cannon is on the show today, and if you want to get inspired to make that leap, to finally jump in to the razor wire, you'll understand what we're talking about as you watch this episode of entrepreneurship. And you're in corporate right now, you've been in corporate, and there's just that nag, that pull that there's something for you on the other side with entrepreneurship. This episode is for you. Reagan has made that jump very well. She's had an incredible career in corporate for 20 years at just the highest of high levels. And she went through a lot of preparation, making that jump to entrepreneurship as a consultant, as a coach, as a speaker. But she knew there was just a time that, she just had to jump and go and make that move. And she's certainly glad that she did, but there's some lessons that have come up that surprised her, from a mindset and identity standpoint to really practical, tangible things that, oh, wow, okay, wasn't quite ready for that, but let's go. And some words of wisdom, she got from her mentors, both in corporate and outside of it. So I just love this episode. We have a blast jumping in and really digging in around this concept of making that transition. So often we hear, the negative side of corporate. That's why we go into entrepreneurship. And those are the things that are talked about together most of the time. I'm running from corporate to go into entrepreneurship. But we really dig into the strengths of corporate and those skills that you have to really thrive over there, and bringing them over into owning your own business. And I encourage, Reagan encourages, so many of these skills that we go through them in this episode of, hang on to that speed, that organization, the things that got you to a high level in corporate, bring those over to entrepreneurship, because wow, that's lacking a lot of times when people go and start a company. So to realize that you have some things that are a leg up when it comes to entrepreneurship. And because of the parallels here, even if you aren't making that leap from corporate to entrepreneurship, you're going to get so much out of this episode with Reagan. All right, let's jump in. Reagan Cannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Oh, yes. We are in close enough proximity that we're both in the middle of some nice rain right now. So if it looks or sounds stormy, it is. So there you go, everyone. Watching, listening, all that fun stuff. Reagan, I'm so glad you're here. This is a blast. We got to connect via, Brand Builders Group. Another amazing connection from that. And I'm so glad to have you here and really digging into this topic today on something that you have gone through yourself and done it very well, I will say. And this is the idea of, thriving, not just jumping into entrepreneurship, but kind of thriving in it when you've made that transition from corporate. And I love, conversations we've had, thoughts that you've sent over and all of that. I'm like, hey, here's some big areas that I wish I had known. And so I'm excited to go through this topic because we haven't covered this, And before we dig into that, give folks a little bit of geography of your corporate life a little bit and what led you to the entrepreneur side and how you're helping folks right now.
Great. Well, I spent over 20 years in corporate America. I worked for very large corporations, Fortune 15 companies. I worked for Amazon. I worked for AT&T primarily, and was able to spend time in those huge corporations as a senior leader, and was really enjoyed leading people. It's hard to sort of put a thread through my career because was in marketing, I was in sales, I was in customer experience. CX, tech, data and analytics. Like I've done a lot of different things in those organizations. All love taking care of people. But what I really, really loved was being a leader. And so I had an opportunity to work in AT&T's corporate university, doing leadership development. And then I actually led all executive development and coaching for Amazon globally. So, when you have
Wow.
1.5 million employees, the top 4,000 people are considered executives because, of course, it's staggering the number of.
Yeah.
So we got to put together all kinds of great programs, both virtually and really I was doing virtual and hybrid leadership even before COVID. In 2019, I wrote an entire strategy on it for Amazon. And so just getting to do a lot of work with leaders, always loved it and knew someday I wanted to go out on my own. Someday I wanted to do speaking full-time and coaching full-time, but never really understood the right time. I think of it, Jason, like that double Dutch jump rope. You're constantly looking at it going, now, when do I jump in? How do I leave corporate and jump into entrepreneurship? And
it's such a great analogy. I love that so much. Because it's scary. Almost though, like with razor wire, right? Like jumping with razor wire, because you feel like, okay, if I jump at the run, like you feel the danger, like there more so than just maybe embarrassment, right?
Right? Yeah, you're right. Like if a jump rope hits you, you're fine. If you're right, like if a razor blade hits you, you might not be able to pay your mortgage. So the entrepreneurship, the stakes are slightly higher, going out on your own. And so there's just, I finally did make the cutover and go out full time 1 year ago. So I've been doing coaching and speaking and lots of other things for years, but really getting to do it full time a year ago.
Yeah. And so what was that pull, right? Because you're thriving in corporate, right? You're doing it well. Was it so that, I'm sure there's 100 little reasons, right? But overall, is it this idea more of so you can just do that part that you love, the leadership, guiding people part, and kind of not have to mess with the other things maybe that pulled you away from that?
Well, here's what I found myself doing. I found myself leading leadership development instead of delivering leadership development. And so when I was, a lot of times I wouldn't be the one building the programs. I'd be the one inspecting it, funding it, making sure it got through, or I would lead coaches, but I would try to pick up coaching clients on my own, but I had way too many responsibilities as the executive that led that department versus being able to deliver. And so at some point I just kind of said to myself, I really want to be in the business of delivering. And my why, the Simon Sinek, find your why. My why is to use my words in a meaningful way to help people change their life. And that's why speaking and coaching, it's really the core of what I love. It's like my energy level explodes, but there is no way, and I believe this firmly, there is no way I would be where I am and successfully, getting this successfully and unsuccessfully, because that's part of the journey is being unsuccessful too, but really being in this entrepreneurship, if I didn't have the tutoring of corporate life for the last 20 years. It really taught me so many lessons. I got to execute so many things. I got to deliver. I got to struggle, get frustrated, get fired, get promoted, go through all the things. And now when I really do coaching, I do it from a place of experience. I do it from a place of that's where I've come from. That is a place that I've absolutely screwed up royally. And now I can tell you how not to do that. It's been an amazing tutor for the last 20 years. And so now I just feel like I'm able to share that with others.
I love that perspective too, because most of the time what we hear is sort of the negative. I'm running from corporate, right, to get away from it and go into entrepreneurship, and instead having that, like, I'm so much better at this because of the trial by fire. And I think with corporate too, what's great, I mean, that's why I specifically wanted a sales role when I went and got a full-time job. When I first came to Colorado, I wanted to be forced to do the reps. I wanted, like, day in, day out, there's no choice. As an entrepreneur, you can always be like, do that tomorrow. You're in corporate full-time. It's just go, 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 go. And that's such a great just work ethic that now if you bring that into entrepreneurship, oh my gosh, sure, there's plenty of challenges, but don't let that go, everyone. Watching, listening, if you've got that and you've had that in it, like, don't let that go, because that will serve you so well. So I love that. I love that perspective with it. And I want to, as we talk about how people can prepare, right, get from corporate into entrepreneurship, I want to kind of pepper in all along the way those little elements, those things of, yes, be thinking about this. This is warning, hey, get ready. But here's how you can use what you're great at because you come from corporate to now make that transition. So I love that. And what's sort of the first one that you kind of usually lead with folks when you are kind of, hey, you thinking about this? All right. What's that biggest, I guess, what was the biggest slap in the face a little bit with entrepreneurs, like, whoa, I did not see that coming?
Well, there's a few, but one of them is, I think if you are going from being a corporate leader, and you have been, or working in a role, and then you become an entrepreneur, don't underestimate the identity change that causes for you. When I would go to a party before, I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Reagan. I'm a executive at Amazon. Oh my gosh, what's that like? Amazon, everyone knows it. Everyone's aware of it. They have 19 boxes sitting on their porch right now that came from Amazon, right? So it was really clear cut, and people understood me, and I understood how to explain what I was doing. And so I had this identity. And when you leave, you start to say, I'm a speaker. And they're like, oh, you're a speaker. Like, are you a motivational speaker? And of course, to me, that's like nails on chalkboard. I visualize like the guy in the 80s with the cassette tape box you buy, I'm a motivational speaker,
Right.
Buy the cassette tape for $19.99. I'm like, oh, but that's the only context they know speakers. And so I would try to say things like, well, I unblock leaders so they can scale their career and their organizations, and their leadership. And they would say, like, what does that mean? Or I help women get promoted into senior roles. And they were like, how? Why? Do you do consulting? Like, so it's just really hard, Jason, to figure out, how do you introduce yourself? So like one of the tips I always give entrepreneurs is that are leaving, a stable job or a job they've done for a long time. It could, if that's your identity, a big part of it could be your identity, and just be prepared to let go of that identity. I remember when my marketing, I have a really trusted partner, my branding partner, she sat down and she said, Reagan, stop calling yourself an executive. You need to put speaker, not leader, first. And what she was trying to do was help me, Jason, let go of that identity and embrace my new identity as an entrepreneur, as the founder and CEO of my company, as a speaker, as a coach, and let go of what I had as my kind of identity blanket for the last 20 years.
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, that's another area we don't hear about, right? You have the tactile things, and I know you described this identity crisis in terms of, or in the context of, describing it to other people. And that's fine, because all those ways that you did work, there's a version of that, but it's way more important to yourself. And what we're talking about here is that identity crisis, like for you, not even verbalizing, but just, okay, what am I? Who am I? What am I doing again? You know, when you wake up and it really, it's so interesting because it really does go beyond, what you say to someone at a party. It really goes into waking up on a Tuesday morning and you're like, what am I doing today again? That,
Yeah, right.
That when you worked at Amazon, there was no question. It's up, you go, you're here, you've got all of this. And there is that little bit of, even if it's 30 seconds or half a day, you'll have that feeling a little bit of like, what am I doing again? Like, exactly. No, I mean, like, really, like in life, what am I doing again?
Yeah, like every time I opened like a small business banking account and a small business, I'm like, I'm a small business owner. Like just those things you tell yourself or just sound different. So I would just warn people to be prepared for that identity crisis, or just, I would just say almost like rebranding of yourself internally. That happens.
Yeah, because that, having that clarity, at any stage, whether you're making the transition or just, being that business owner, having that clarity in what you do, what you do in your business, all of that. I mean, that's big. There's having the words for it. That's great. That's branding and figure out those unique messaging. Find your, unique way to say how you help women succeed in, corporate and, have your process, have all that. But behind all of that is that confidence and that knowing that you know what you're doing, right? Language, you can figure that out.
That's right.
But that's what comes through more than anything and is going to make or break you at that networking event when you're describing yourself, is that knowing.
I think too, the other advice I got when I first left, it dovetails onto that, because some people might be listening going, oh my gosh, does this mean I have to like totally figure it out? I have to have like this identity outlined or whatever. And what I would say is the best advice I got from an entrepreneur when I first, started was, what you think will work won't, and what you don't think will work will. And therefore, one of the best things I had was to have an experimental mindset and have this, that's not always appreciated in corporate. Like, they're not like, I'm just gonna, like, this could be $100 million mistake, but let's like try it, Like,
let's roll the dice.
The big hashtag whatevs. Like, that's not that. A lot of times in a corporate environment, it can be discouraged to be experimental in the way you approach things. But as an entrepreneur, you have to have that mindset. And failure just means that's, if you fail at something or you don't like it or you hate doing it or whatever, that doesn't mean that that's bad. What that means is now you have clarity. And as an entrepreneur, clarity is king. I mean, you just getting that crystal clear on what you do, how you can help people. That problem you solve is so clear. And so if you try something and it doesn't work, it's okay. That's great. It means you can let that go. There are definitely things. I made this the last year of yes. Like, I just said yes to a bunch of things that maybe in the future I'll say yes to or no to. I remember I said yes to coaching this one coaching client, and it wasn't my typical in the box kind of person I would coach, whatever that means. And what you might put in my identity, and she ended up being a fabulous client. She referred me to someone who then and they became a client, then referred me to someone who then became a client, who then referred me to someone else who became a client. And what was interesting is all of the people that were referred to me were founders, which makes sense because I deal so much with scale and helping leaders scale. The founders get into this trouble where they're like, oh my gosh, now I have employees. What do I do with these crazy humans? Or my business is now $50 million business. How do I communicate at scale? And I can't call each person individually. So what ended up happening was, by saying yes and experimenting and have that mindset of this could totally be a bad move, I ended up finding some of the most fulfilling clients I have that really do fit within my mission and problem, but I would not have found if I'd not said yes and sort of had that experiment mindset.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's such a key indicator, because we get paralyzed, right? With, I've got to have this, I don't know, it's my exact avatar, and I've got, and have this down. And yes, like going through that process, just like you've done, and like, here's okay, I've got my body, here's who I'm looking for. That's the thing, that flexibility, that, okay, let's see, right? Like, it doesn't mean you shift your entire, but it's a case by case, right? You figure this out, you evaluate. It's data, and that goes into another thing that you talked about. And as we shift from identity and into this aspect, it's like, as entrepreneurs, we can get so wrapped up in, we are our business and vice versa and all that. So if uncertainty, if rejection happens of the business, and this is something that you don't have in corporate. You can have your identity and get feedback, but if someone hates Amazon and you work at Amazon, you're not like, oh, why don't they like me, right? Like that. That sounds ridiculous, right? But if someone rejects your offer as a solopreneur, you're just like, what did I do? They must hate who I am. Like, that just gets internalized. And that's another great thing to bring over from corporate, right? Is this disconnect of, okay, well, here's my business and here's the thing and here's data on this. If someone likes it, someone doesn't. And then there's me and the human and all of that. And that's harder to distinguish sometimes, but I think it's another great thing to bring over, and which ties into another aspect that I know I've heard you talk about is the sales aspect, because it ties right into that. So I'd love your take on this, because this is another one that, unless you're in sales in corporate, you haven't had to deal with this. So what's some of that preparation people can have for that one?
So great, Jason. You're so right. You're in the business of sales when you're an entrepreneur, period. A lot of people are like, I'm not a salespeople, because they picture like the slimy used car salesman, or high pressure sales environment. But sales, one of the best definitions I heard around sales was when I was right out of college. My very first mentor taught me, sales is the transfer of emotion for someone to take a specific action. And so you have enthusiasm around the problem that you solve or the product that you have. You've invested, you love it, you've built it, you've developed it. And what you need to do is transfer that enthusiasm to someone so that they take the action of hiring you or buying your product. And I think what happens is people think, why I want to be a coach is because I really love helping people. And so they leave corporate and they go, I'm going to be a coach and this is great. And then you go out, and what you may or may not know is you just took a sales job. And what you have to do first is find people by building relationships with them, understanding the challenges that they have, understanding how you may be able to help them solve those challenges, and then transferring, that's when the sales happens, transferring your emotion and enthusiasm around the problem you solve to them so they take action and hire you. And I think what people think is, I've left to be a coach, I've left to be a speaker, I've left to build this product or something else or to open my first retail store or whatever. You just entered a sales job. You just took a sales job. And what's wonderful is it's so relationship based. So much of what gets done, especially in entrepreneurship, is just it's done through relationships. And this does happen in corporate. People who say, I just am going to do a great job and everyone's going to buy into my idea. Like, that doesn't happen. You got to go meet with people. You've got to pre-meet before the meeting. You've got to understand them, sit down, hear their challenges, address their concerns in your proposals. All that kind of muscle that you're building, you need that muscle. Really, you need it. Really, as an entrepreneur, you absolutely have to get great at it. And so I think that was sort of oh yeah, if I don't hunt, I don't eat, So there is a little bit more pressure. But the counterpoint to relieve you from that is you can do it in the context of relationship and adding value to the people you come in contact with. And that's really the mindset you need to have, but it is a sales job.
Hopefully, if people are struggling with that and they've gone out to be a coach, a consultant, whether making the transition or just starting from scratch, I hope that's a distinction that does bring some relief, because done right, and I will say right, not just a different way, I would say done right, sales is exactly what you described. It's relationship. It's relationship and answering questions is what it should be, right? Having that enthusiasm that you described for what you do and how you help people. And and I'm really like specific to coaches and consultants, because a lot of them don't realize that, and they're in this mindset, help. And yes, sales is that icky thing over there I've got to go do, but they are the most closely aligned at being able to do sales the right way, because their intent is to help and guide and all of it. Like, it's just more coaching. It's pre-coaching to them hiring you to coach, right? It's transfer that and bring it along. And yeah, I hope that, even a few people who are, I used to be petrified of that idea, like, embrace that. And of course, I know then comes, okay, well, how? All of that. But at a broad level, though, it really is that. Just meet people, understand them, connect, communicate what you do, and then just ask for be intentional on that side of it. You do have to carry it over the line, for sure. But
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Because you can't do it for free and pay the mortgage. Like, that's not how it works. Right. And that is, it's a really challenging aspect. And I think people who are considering that jump should have that in mind.
Yeah. And I feel like we've missed an area here of you. I want to understand exactly how you're helping, because we understand, the shift you made into coaching and consulting, and you've described a couple of those folks you kind of found accidentally, by that experimentation, with founders. And who is that ideal coaching consultant client for you right now?
I love helping people move. There's a really important jump, Jason, when you're a manager, when you first become a manager, and then you become a manager of managers, and then you lead organizations. I love, because when you become a manager of managers, you have to get work done through the managers, not through yourself directly with your team. And then when you become an organizational leader, this is when you have multiple locations, maybe even in a hybrid environment, they're all geographically scattered. All of a sudden you have to communicate through, you have to be spending the majority of your time on the strategy of the organization instead of the operations. You have to shift from communicating one-to-one to communicating at scale across and using mechanisms and mechanized communication. The people who you hire are now pretty senior. So you have to learn how to recruit, hire, and lead other executive leaders. And that jump, either preparing for that jump, breaking through the glass ceiling for women to make that jump, or having just made that jump and trying to lead others, that is where my passion point is. It's really leaders who need to scale their leadership for their own career and for their teams. That's really where I have a lot of passion. And there are so many things. I led teams of 5,000, 10,000 people, huge, large-scaled organizations. And so I got to do this firsthand. And so now I feel really prepared to turn around and help those scaling leaders grow into high impact and healthy executives.
No, that's fantastic. And how does that start for you in that process? Someone, jumps on board with you, because for me, my mind just goes instantly of the 1,000 things they've got to deal with. If, again, they're going to get to that role, or if they've just landed it and they're like, what do I do? What's that first starting spot with them?
So I have something called the Scaling Leadership Program. And what I do is, the very first thing I do is put them through a proprietary assessment that I created from a nationwide research study I did last year. So preparing for my TED Talk last year, I hired a researcher and her and I went out and we asked the questions around why people are promoted, or in the case of women, why they're often not promoted. And we sat down with leaders and we asked them, like, what are you looking for? What are the tips? How are you successful? Because we only interviewed people who were leaders of senior leaders. So really these ultra kind of executives. And we got their best tips, tricks, insights, how they see people scale, when they don't see people scale. In the case of women, what are some of the real challenges women face that are unique for women? And so we collected all of this research, and I was able to do so much from that research project. And one of them was in this scaling leadership program. Because you're right, Jason, where do you start? So where I start is first with a self-assessment. And I go through and we go through the different questions that you need to answer and reflect on how your leadership needs to be transforming when you become that organizational leader. For people who are promoted, it's saying, what can you be doing now to get ready, to be ready, or what might be holding you back from breaking through? And then for those who've made it, it's saying, where are the areas that you're still leading like that manager, or you're still leading like that manager of managers instead of organizational leadership. And when I like to call it sometimes dump out the purse and dig through what's in there. When we do that together, what I often find is people are burned out. People are trying to do the job of someone much more junior than them. They have not let go of certain things, or they have unrealistic expectations on themselves. And for women in particular, they have these societally driven beliefs that really hold them back. And what I find is that they need to have that awareness at first. And then what we do is we partner together through the process, either through my speaking, my workshops, or my coaching, to unlearn what you have and relearn a new way of leading it really leads to that freedom, that health, and the kind of results and impact you want in your team.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. Just because it's the corporate world and there are multiple decision makers. This thing also applies to entrepreneurship. There's a thread here, but how much, especially when you're trying to land that next level, how much is get the skills, here's what you need to do, and then how much is make sure other people see it, the marketing, if you will, of the skills you're bringing in, and especially for the case of women trying to come up and now they're double battling, right? They're they have to advocate for themselves and overcome all the discrimination that's there with all of that and the bias.
Yeah. So what I say is there's I love using the 3 R's. Through 3 R's of what you can do for a quick kind of inspection. One of them is results. You cannot move up in the organization without the results. That is table stakes. But what I like to say is it's the results and who knows about them. Because you can, like that tree falling in the forest, you can have fabulous results, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter. And same is true in entrepreneurship, right? We can have this fabulous product or this fabulous program. If nobody knows about it, then it doesn't matter. So it's the results and how you talk about it. The second is reputation. You have to have a brand identity and a reputation. And I would say women in particular are terrible at marketing ourselves and our reputation, like making sure people know what we've achieved, know how we've done it, what we stand for, what difference we can make. There's almost this, like, we were told, don't brag on yourself. But it's important, if people don't know your reputation, if they don't know, if you don't have that reputation that says what you can do, what you stand for, what you're known for, then it really, that you can't move ahead. You have to have the reputation. And the third is you have to have the relationships. And that's where if you don't have those relationships, and this is true in entrepreneurship too, you have to have relationships. Relationships are everything. And so sometimes I'll use a simple example. There's lots of research that says women show up when the meeting starts and we leave when the meeting ends. And like men come early and like talk about like golf and they hang out and these things together. And then they stay after the meeting and they're like, let's go grab a drink and whatever. They're investing in their relationships. And women were like, I get in, I get out, I got work to do. It's about the tasks. It's about the tasks. But here's what I'll tell you. In my research, what I found is the thing that actually rated last was competency in the skill or domain. It was the last place skill to move into executive leadership. So we spent all this time on like, so results are part of it. You have to be good, Jason, but it is not just domain expertise. And the same is true in entrepreneurship. You can have this outrageous domain expertise. Oh, I'm going to totally do consulting on this thing because I am the domain expert on it. That's true. Great. But you also have to build the reputation and the relationships in order for you to then advance your business. And so it's like there are, to the point you're making today, there are mirrors between the kind of work you need to do to advance your career in corporate and the kind of work you need to do to advance yourself as an entrepreneur.
Oh yeah, and each have their unique challenges, but yeah, there's so many parallels because, like in entrepreneurship, grab that client testimonial, right? Have that out there, and what's the corporate version of that? Because it's one thing to, and it's the hard part for both sides is that bragging on yourself. Hey, I got these amazing results. Hey, did you hear how awesome I am? Did I tell you this morning how awesome I am? I mean, I say that all the time, but most people are uncomfortable with that. And how do you do that, right? So if we know that when it comes from somebody else, comes from a third party, then it's given even, have somebody else tell you. What's the corporate version of a client testimonial?
I would just say there are some organizations that have this really mechanized. At Amazon, we had something called Forte, where you collected up testimonials and anecdotes from 360 degrees. The people that work for you, the people you worked with, and the people you worked for. And they're, actually right now on my resume, I have 2 of those testimonials from corporate where my peers actually weighed in on my, gave a little 150, 200 character little assessment of my leadership. And so I think also there are times when I would ask people, can you email my boss that? And that's okay. Like, will you tell my boss that? Or in the next meeting, will you make sure you call out my team, what we did for that and how we partnered with you? Or what I would really do, and this is the fun part, Jason, I love giving people credit and I love calling people out and recognizing people. It's amazing how when you invest in lifting up other people, they turn around and want to lift you up too. And so there were times you can explicitly ask for it, but also just building the kind of habit where you advertise others well. You're constantly talking about what they did well, how they don't. And in corporate, we just get so dang busy. We don't do that. And if you are the kind of person who does, you build tremendous followership and loyalty and support. And I think that's super important. And like in an entrepreneurship context, going on LinkedIn and commenting on people's posts and celebrating what they've achieved and making sure you're there to share that, or referring people to them, being that mouthpiece, like being the kind of person who's constantly trying to lift up others. It really is, that's a great mindset to have, not doing it with the sole purpose of getting something back, but having that kind of mindset and habit is super important when you want to have people reciprocate it back. Go first. Be the first to do it. Call them out first and celebrate.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love that. I want to touch on this other aspect that I found really intriguing when we first talked about your experience making that transition, corporate to entrepreneurship, going through brand builders, and because you were like, hey, let's do this. I'm going to speak. I'm going to write. You have your TED Talk. I want to dig into that too. And I want to make sure we cover that. But there was this speed at which you were working and just on your own stuff that was natural for you because you came from corporate, right? There's just a velocity to it. And I'd love for you to share some of that. And because it's something that I think is missing in a lot of entrepreneurship that we could really use more of.
Yeah. So I have a mental model that makes some people crazy, but I'll just share it, which is I think sometimes we think of 100% value as 100% quality. So something has to be absolutely perfect, and then we're delivering 100% value. It's got to be done right, Jason. It's got to be, it's got to be excellent. It's got to be this really high bar, and it's got to be. But I had a manager I worked for that was a really senior leader, and he said, Reagan, there is a premium on speed. There is a premium on speed. And if you look at some of the first movers, maybe some of the FANG companies, right? These big, successful companies, one of the things they understood was speed and growth and the speed to that. And so what I do is instead of the pie chart in my mind being 100% value equals 100% quality, instead I change it to say 100% value is what I have to deliver. But 20 to 30% of that could be speed, which means I make trade-offs in the way I'm executing so that maybe it's not perfect, but it's done 2 weeks early. Or I have a client right now that's trying to get out. I know that one of the reasons why we've been successful in working together is because she understands the premium on speed. She had some glaring leadership challenges in her organization. And one of the benefits I brought to the table as one of the people she hired was that I work with velocity. And she would rather me, maybe it's not exactly, it can't be low quality, by the way. But it can be, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I think we think if it's perfect, it's best. And I just don't believe that. I think being perfect, I hate it when I make mistakes. I hate it when I fail. Don't get that wrong. But I also understand that part of what I'm offering people is speed. And there's a premium on that. And that it's worth a lot. It was worth a lot to this client that I was able to get a leadership development program, vetted with her organization, piloted, built out, rolled out in like 4 months. I got something out so fast to her whole organization. That had so much value to her. Could I have redone the PowerPoint slides 19 more times to make it perfect? Could I have, instead of 2 weeks of research, instead of a month of a pilot, could I have done 2 months of the pilot? Could I have learned more? Maybe. But the value I offered was speed. And I think I definitely learned that in corporate, that there is customers have insatiable demand for the right now. I love, Jeff Bezos has said, no customers, could you deliver that slower to my house? I'd love it if it took 2 weeks instead of 2 days. That'd be awesome. No, said no one never, So there is this delight and around speed. And so sometimes that means I make really intentional and thoughtful trade-offs so that I can deliver something. And then you start building the velocity, you start building the muscle for speed. You start making those trade-offs very quickly, and it's no longer painful for you. My little perfectionists are dying right now. But that's also, you didn't have that luxury in corporate. It was due at the end of the month, period. And so you had to hustle to get it done, and you learned how to make those trade-offs.
Well, and that's really the thing too, is because someone who's just been an entrepreneur and you don't have to get your new offer put together quicker and stuff. But it's not just a matter of beating somebody or anything like that. It's getting that market feedback so much faster, because that's the thing. It's we're not talking about creation, it's done. Creation, it's done kind of speed. It's creation. Awesome. Now I have data back. Okay, that worked. That didn't work. That thing I would have spent another 2 weeks on. They don't even care. We're pulling it from the entire product because it doesn't even matter. Okay, great. I know that, and I didn't just waste 2 weeks, right? I love that distinction. And again, that energy that you can bring over, and if hopefully little things that are inspiring, entrepreneurs who haven't made that leap, and they've oh yeah, no, let's get moving. Let's go.
You're so right. Rather than rather than sit there paralyzed on every way you could go ask your customer. Go ask your customer. Let them dictate to you what the trade-off should be and where you need to spend more time and less time. And it's so true, Jason. Let them be the tiebreaker.
Yeah, I love that. I want to wrap up here. Tell people, you mentioned the TED Talk. Tell us about that and how that came about, and what it's all about, and where we can go see it.
Well, again, all about relationships, right? When I was at Amazon, there is a really talented leader here in Denver who she actually does community relations. And when I went out on my own, she just called me and said, "What can I do? How can I help you?" Even though I had just left Amazon, she's like, her and I had a relationship. She just said, "What can I do to help you?" And she said, I love seeing women entrepreneurs be successful. And she said, I know the people that do TEDx Women's here in the state. Would you like an introduction? I was like, yes. Yes, I would like an introduction. Thank you. Met with them. They're this fabulous couple that do TEDx events here in Colorado, and applied and got to be a part of it. And what was so cool was, one of the challenges another challenge you face when you're an executive is that you should be good at a lot of things. Like you can pivot from because you're like in a finance meeting, then an HR meeting, then a leadership meeting, then you're back to a performance meeting, and then a sales meeting, and then, marketing meeting all day long. So you feel like you could talk about anything and do anything. But you and I know, Jason, you can't do that when you go out when you have a TED Talk. It's an idea worth spreading, not 9 ideas worth spreading, right? And so I had to go, it forced me down this path it was a good forcing function for me to get real clear on, of all the ideas I have that could really help women, what is something I could share with mid-career women to help them break into executive leadership? And that was really what I found a lot of my passion. And so that's when I came up with this concept called relational courage. And it's this idea that we, a lot of times as women, want to wait till we have confidence before we take action. But courage is actually taking action in the face of your fears. And even when you're afraid, you still do it. And the thing we're most afraid about is in the context of our relationships. We don't want to challenge our boss. We don't want to look incompetent in front of our peers. We don't want to fail, so we try to control our teams. And so I had all these theories, and I went out and did, like I said, a nationwide research study and really validated what were the things that were holding women back. And what I found was we needed relational courage to kind of contract the relationships we have at work, because that's what's holding us back. That's why only 1 in 4 executive C-suite jobs are women, even though basically half of frontline manager roles are women. Like, we're losing all these women along the way. And so that's the focus of my TED Talk. And I hope everybody goes out and watches it and enjoys it, refers it to people. I've had so many men tell me I'm going to parent differently. I've got women in my life I'm going to lead differently or support differently. And also, of course, women, saying they're very inspired to change. And again, because I want to change people's lives with my words, it's been an amazing experience.
Oh, I love that. I love that you've done that. That's so fantastic. Because you made that distinction of acting in that face of fear, having that courage, instead of sitting there going, well, let me do some things and I'll be more confident to go and do, like, I've heard someone else to kind of describe it that way too. Confidence is a result, right? It's not the beginning. You don't get that until you've jumped in, petrified, and come out the other side. Even if whatever the results, just having gone through the motion and again and again and again. So I love that. I love that you've had that.
I would even say, in the context of the entrepreneur conversation we're having here, you can do a lot of things to prepare to leave corporate. I started getting my coaching certification. I wrote a book. I have a lot of things I worked on so that I could try and leave. But at the end of the day, Jason, you have to just put on your left turn signal, cut across traffic, and leave corporate at some point. There is no soft landing. There is no elegant off-ramp. We want there to be, because we, especially those of us who've worked in corporate context, love to control things and have things, structured and sequenced. But at the end of the day, you have to have that courage. And you do have to say, I don't exactly know. It's not completely formed. You've heard us just banter about experimentation and what fails and what doesn't work and does work. At the end of the day, there's nothing that replaces that courage that says, I'm afraid and I'm going to do it anyways. And it takes courage.
Yeah. To make that razor wire double Dutch jump into entrepreneurship. Hopefully that's a great, inspiring image for everyone to leave them with. No, trust us. It'll be great. Just close your eyes and jump. Come on in. That's powerful, because that doesn't mean don't prepare and all of that. It just means, you can check yourself. You know when it's procrastination or preparation. You got to jump. I love that. So who is the ideal person who needs to reach out to you, and how do they do so?
So if you're looking for someone to come speak at an event where you want to have women accelerate into leadership roles, I have a keynote that is specifically for women that help them be aware of the areas that are holding them back and break through using relational courage. I also made a companion keynote to that for allies and sponsors of women. So if you have an organization where you're looking for someone to come in and speak to people who say, hey, I see women holding back. I see them not speaking up in meeting. I know they know the answer they want to, or I see them controlling their team instead of empowering their team. How do I help them? I have practical tips in a keynote for allies and sponsors. So it's kind of all the great work from my research, and that goes into those two keynotes, and I can do them in workshops as well. And then I'd say the second person who should reach out to me, Jason, is someone who is growing their leadership and they are scaling. Either their business is exploding or they're getting a huge promotion, and they can tell that jump from leading, being a leader of teams to really that organizational leadership. What do they need to be doing differently to scale themselves? That's really where my scaling leadership program helps. So all this idea of, I just want to unblock leaders to reach their full potential. And so that's who I'm there to help.
Fantastic. How do they find you? Where should they go?
They should go to reagancannon.com. I have all my information there, all my press kit, my demo reel, everything is there that they can look at, and link in with me on LinkedIn, because I'm constantly putting fresh content out there as well.
Fantastic. I've loved this conversation, and I hope we've kind of eased some stress for folks who they've been wanting to jump in, and giving them some good, maybe anxiety went up a little bit, like, oh, I didn't think about that, and then maybe we brought it back down by the end, hopefully.
Well, it comes down to this. You can worry about revenue, you can worry about marketing clicks, you can worry about that. But at the end of the day, the question I ask myself every single day, there's two questions. One is, who can I impact today, and what do I need to learn? And if you stay focused on that, then you can make a difference in people's lives as an entrepreneur. And so I'd say at the end of the day, that's what makes it worth it.
Fantastic. I love that. Reagan, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Jason.
And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of this show. If you want help creating authority-building video content, or even a client-generating show of your own, go to MediaLeadsCo.com and let's connect. I'll talk to you soon on the next Strategy in Action.
This show is powered by Media Leads. To get your next great podcast produced, go to MediaLeadsCo.com.